Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Joining us tonight, it is Stephen Simcox of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast. We've got some Diamond Sports to catch up on here as we are in full spring of the spring sport season. OU softball had their streak snapped. Oklahoma State has climbed to the top of the Big 12 standings. In baseball, we'll get a little TCU spring football sprinkled in the end as well. That coming up and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here with Stephen Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs joining us today. And Stephen, let's start, we're going to talk some baseball. Also, it's great. We are now fully in spring sports season, right? Spring football is happening. I guess once that wraps up, we can really, truly, and fully dive in to spring sports, but the transfer portal is going to maybe throw a wrench into that. So I feel like now is the right time to appreciate it. I'm glad you're here because, I'm part of the spring madness. I call Richmond Spiders baseball on the weekends. So I don't always get to see a lot of what's happening in the Big 12 and Diamond Sports because I'm calling some Diamond Sports of my own. So we're very glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, we've talked about it before on the crossover episodes. I mean, football has really become a year-round event in a lot of ways, but it's nice to have baseball and softball along with the other spring sports going on. And yeah, if you're just kind of tuning in, I get it can be overwhelming. There's already been like 30-plus games in softball, even more than that. But yeah, we can help you get caught up, and there's still plenty of baseball and softball to come over the next few weeks.
Yeah, let's start with the big story over the weekend in Diamond Sports and also, kind of one of the bigger stories in all of college sports this weekend. Oklahoma had their 40-game winning streak snapped. Now, they're 38-1 this year, but it goes back to last year when they were down one game in the Women's College World Series. They took the final two games from FSU to win the College World Series last year. They ripped off 38 straight wins. And I'm not sure if you saw it, but Texas celebrated, and rightfully so, like they just won the Super Bowl. Texas beat Oklahoma in softball for the first time since 2014.
Wow.
Today, or this past weekend. Yeah. So, just kind of your thoughts on a 38-game winning streak, especially in a diamond sport. That's like unheard of.
No, it's insane. And I mean, Oklahoma has been so dominant for so many years, but this team appears to be another level. They've won so many games via the run rule as well. But anybody who understands baseball and softball knows, you can have a random day where your pitcher's just not in the zone or just doesn't have their best stuff. Your bats kind of go quiet. You're in a close game and you lose a silly one, or you blow a lead late. And to just rip off 38 straight, and more than that when you include the last two of last season in the national championship series, is wild. I remember Baylor had them on the ropes a few weeks ago.
Yeah, they walked them off.
Yeah, they walked them off, and you just thought, man, maybe that was the moment. If they could escape that, they could go all the way. Couldn't quite do it, but Oklahoma softball is it's insane. It's crazy what they've done. They're the most dominant probably program in the Big 12 at the moment, and hats off to them for going almost going the distance in some ways. And yeah, big moment for Texas. Like, I get it, you knock off a team like that's a huge deal, but again, it kind of feeds into that narrative of UT just sort of not really being itself, being the right. Big flagship university it's supposed to be, but big time accomplishment for them to knock off OU, even if it's only in a single game.
Well, I just tally it, and I think I got this right. I think OU won 31 of these games by run rule.
Man.
And prefacing that win for Texas had been shut out 3-0, and then had gotten run ruled the day before they finally got the job done. The 4-2 win, I believe it was, in the final game. So yeah, I mean, this group. Now the funny thing is this: that OU is no longer, they're not at the top of the standings anymore. Oklahoma State, the Cowgirls, they're 11-1. They are at the top of the standings now But yeah, I think just across the board, we can all really appreciate, what OU softball has done. And I mean, I think that Steven, this is a question we'll probably talk about tomorrow night. But like, is there a more dominant program in any sport? I mean, not just across the Big 12, but like nationwide. It's like this is the most dominant sport we've seen right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not slowing down.
No, I mean, unless there's one that I'm missing, I can't think of it. And honestly, we've seen basketball teams go on crazy runs. Obviously, UConn and women's basketball had those insane winning streaks, but as we sort of laid out here, it's just so much harder to do in baseball and softball. Like OU tweeted, I saw this yesterday. They were like, "Hey, we won the series," which is really like that's the goal
Right.
when you're
Take
when
2 or
you're
3, right?
playing. Yeah, you take
Yeah.
2 or 3 in a diamond sport. Like that's what you want to do. You just kind of keep it rolling. Eventually, that piles up to a really good season.
Mhm.
But they've been sweeping everybody. So. Um, Really interesting and great accomplishment that they had. I can't really think of a more dominant program. And yeah, Oklahoma State, enjoy all you can, I guess, before that Bedlam series later on this year.
All right, quick word from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That's built.com to see the latest Built Bar flavors that are available. They got mint brownie, coconut, and coconut almond. Built Bars have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 net carbs, as well as 17 grams of protein. Once again, built.com today. It's built.com. Promo code LOCK15, LOCKED15, LOCK15 at built.com today for 15% off. So, Steven, right now, as we get into this baseball conversation across the Big 12, in the top 10 right now, Oklahoma State checks in at number 3, Texas Tech at number 9, and Texas at number 10. TCU has gotten themselves back in the top 25. They're at number 21 in the country right now. So I believe there's the 4 teams that are ranked, kind of the 4 teams we thought, right? It's where we thought. But one thing has emerged. Oklahoma State at the top of the conference. West Virginia had their week. They had their little run. That
Mm-hmm.
was nice. But Oklahoma State is kind of now taken over. They're 9-3 in the conference. And the big difference to me, 26-10 overall. But the real big difference is they're 10-3 on the road, right? They've
Yeah.
stacked up double-digit road victories. And they've gotten this thing done. That's what makes this team a bit different than everybody else.
Yeah, Josh. I mean, they've just been the most consistent team in the league. They haven't really hit the meat of their schedule yet. They play TCU this weekend, and they'll have series with Tech and Texas later on. But still, the way they've gotten this done has been really impressive. They got swept by Gonzaga early in the year, but really since then they've run off 6 straight series wins. They took 2 or 3 from Vandy in the opening weekend of the season. Justin Campbell is their ace. He kind of anchors that staff. He's been around there for a little while now. And he's doing some great things on Friday night for them. And then they have some pitching depth, which is really what I would say among the rest of the Big 12 schools. Nobody else can really say that as far as starting pitching depth throughout the weekend. Texas thought they had it. They really just haven't shown it yet throughout the season. But Bryce Osmond's been really good for them on Sundays. Their lineup is, you look at the batting averages, nothing really pops off the page, but they can go yard. They get timely hits. They sort of, move down the line. They work a lot of walks. They're a patient team at the plate. So they look good. And that was an impressive win. You mentioned West Virginia. They've been sort of the big surprise of the year so far. They swept Baylor and Morgantown. They took 2 or 3 from TCU and Fort Worth. Randy Mazey, he has a fun club. Like they run a lot. They steal a lot of bases. It's kind of an old school sort of small ball team that's trying to manufacture runs. I feel like when it's all said and done, they're going to be, sort of middle of the pack in the Big 12, but I feel like they've equipped themselves well so far. But Oklahoma State going on the road to West Virginia and taking 2 or 3 was impressive, and they look to be the best team in the league right now. We'll see as that schedule gets tougher what happens, but I'm not super worried about it. I mean, as I sort of said, they played good teams in non-conference play, and honestly, other than that Gonzaga series, they handled it well. So they'll drop a series at some point, I'm sure, but I think they have the most potential to kind of run through the rest of the regular season and be pretty steady. They've done this quietly, but they've started racking up some wins, and that's put them at the top of the league right now.
And then on the on the TCU side, TCU has now gotten themselves to second in
Mhm.
the conference now at 10-5. Overall, they're 24-2. They've won 3 straight games, coming off a sweep this weekend of the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Talk about what led to that sweep and kind of what keyed TCU, because it felt like they really hadn't met expectations up to that point.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked. They were 3-7 going into that series in their last 10 games, and I mean, obviously, like baseball's a long season. You have some lulls, but it wasn't so much that they lost a couple series to West Virginia and Texas on the weekends. It was that they got waxed by Dallas Baptist on a Tuesday night, and they're traditionally a pretty good team,
Mm-hmm.
but still, you would like to see a better effort. They got beat by Abilene Christian and UTSA the week before that in some midweek games. And the bats had just gone silent. Like they were not hitting at all. They've had an injury to their pitching staff. Austin Crow, who was supposed to be their ace all year long, he's dealing with a shoulder issue, so he's been out for a couple weeks now. So they're sort of limping into that series against Tech. And I mean, Tech is, what Tim Tadlock has done has been super impressive, but they're able to get a sweep. And Tommy Sacco hit a home run on Thursday night to tie the game at 2, and it felt like that just kind of opened the floodgates for them as far as hitting the ball. They started getting some extra base hits, started piling up some runs, ended up winning that game Thursday, held on Friday in a pretty crazy, controversial ending. Umpire called a balk on River Ridings with the bases loaded, and Tech actually tied the game, but then they had a meeting, and the second base umpire said no, he stepped off, so he's good. They sent everybody back, and then he was able to get a ground out to get out of that jam. But we're pretty dominant on Saturday to close that series, so impressive for them. I think there's some limitations with this team. They don't have a lot of great bats. They hit the ball well this weekend, but typically the way they're going to score runs is by getting a lot of free passes, grinding out at bats, working some walks, finding ways to get base runners on in some non-traditional scenarios. And I just think when you face frontline pitching, that's not a recipe for success, and that's proven to be the case so far this year. But now they're 10-5 in conference play. This schedule's really weird. It's staggered. You got teams that have played, TCU's played 15 conference games. Some teams have played 9. Some teams have played 12.
Right.
But point being, if they find a way in Stillwater to pull out a series against Oklahoma State, well, then suddenly they're kind of in the driver's seat with 6 games left to maybe have a chance to win a Big 12 title, which, I mean, that would be surprising given how they've played at times this year. But we'll see what happens, starting on Friday night. That's going to be a big series. Huge bounce back, though, for TCU, and maybe that's just what they need to get their mojo going. I had sort of given up on them being in the Big 12 title hunt, but they put themselves right back in the mix with a sweep attack over the weekend.
Texas is the big school because it feels like if anybody's got the puncher's chance, well, not puncher's chance, he's got a chance of being above a puncher's chance to win a title, right? I mean, Tennessee right now and Oregon State just seem to be way ahead of the pack. Tennessee, especially. I caught some of them actually last week when they were playing my Missouri Tigers, and it felt like Tennessee didn't score many runs, but they won all 3 games, and it's like, damn, the timely hitting it's unreal. But if any school out of the Big 12 pack is going to make a push, I feel like if you get to Omaha, you're kind of in the mix. It's Texas. They're first in the league in terms of hitting. They're first in the league in pitching. I mean, why has it not manifested itself in wins?
Yeah, I can't make any sense of Texas, Josh. I really don't know.
They're 6-6.
Answer. They're 6-6 in Big 12 play. Ivan Melendez is maybe the best player in college baseball. Like, he's unbelievable. Trey Faltini's really good there at short. Douglas Hodo, Skylar Messenger. We can go down the list. They got a lot of guys. This is my point. Yeah. And you mentioned the way that they hit is super impressive.
Who's this kid? Murphy Steele? How do you pronounce his name?
Yes, Stell. Murphy Stell, yeah. He's really good in that lineup as well. They got a lot of guys that can rake, and then their pitching staff led by Tristan Pete Hansen and Tristan Stevens. That should be a combination that should work really well. Now Stevens has struggled at times this year. He hasn't been as consistent as you would want, but man, I mean, it felt like they were starting to get on a roll. They took 2 out of 3 from TCU in Austin. They go on the road to a K State team that was, I think, 1-8 going into that series, and they lose 2 of those games in Manhattan. And that game on, I guess it was Friday, wasn't really even particularly close. So I still believe in them because in my mind they're the team that could rip off like 12 or 13 in a row just because they have the talent to do it, and the schedule does kind of lighten up for them the rest of the way. But it's just I could see what I see why you go to Lubbock and you lose a series. Like that makes sense to me. I see why you drop one game to Oklahoma and one game to TCU. I don't understand how you go to Kansas State and lose to a struggling
Yeah, they're bad, man. They're
Wildcat
horrible.
team. When it's like an opportunity for you to kind of get going, and maybe that ends up just being their one clunker of a series throughout the year, but it's just piled up. And I mean, I think there is probably a certain amount of everybody's giving them their best shot because they were the consensus number one team in the country going into the year. But yeah, David Pierce has got to find something for this group to play better, and start winning some series because you're running out of time here. But yeah, I would say keep an eye on Texas. They're the dark horse because I could definitely see them winning, 9 or 10 conference games in a row if they can find a way to start stringing some dubs together.
Quick word from our sponsors here on today's show. We are brought to you by our friends at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. You guys can go to BetOnline and BetOnline.net today. They've got odds for the upcoming NFL draft. I should probably take them aside a line to say, hey, will a Big 12 player be drafted in the first round? Right now it's looking like no, but hey, we can hope, right? Over 0.5, Perrion Winfrey. I saw Brees Hall in a mock draft first round, so maybe we'll get them set that line on. They got all kinds of fun props and spreads like that. And also, got the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs coming up right now. You've got the USFL is going on. Steven was watching my Tampa Bay Bandits run train tonight on the Pittsburgh Maulers. Unbelievable stuff. You've got the UFC, Bellator MMA, boxing, F1, NASCAR, whatever you want to get in on, they've got it. BetOnline and BetOnline.net today. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, so Steven, what situation with TCU spring football? Are we doing a spring game? Are we doing a controlled scrimmage? Are we doing the UCF QR codes on the jerseys? What's TCU spring football looking like?
Well, we're doing a spring game. It's going to be this coming Friday night.
Oh,
And
yeah, they're doing the under the lights
yeah,
thing. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
under the lights. Now, it sounds like it's going to be an actual sort of simulated game. In the past, under Gary Patterson, it was really just open practice, and Gary was so paranoid. He would sit a bunch of people out. You would look at the injury list for the spring game, and you'd be like, "Man, do they even have a roster out there?" Because he would just sort of put whoever out there to get some reps and let the fans have a good time. But yeah, it's going to be a spring game. I think we'll get a decent look at who's who on this roster, who maybe has emerged.
What about that quarterback situation? That's what everybody wants to know, right?
Yeah, that's the big question. And honestly, I think it's pretty even, and I think that's an issue. Like I understand that it's very early. The staff is still kind of getting a read on everybody. But I really thought, like, I came into this thinking Chandler Morris feels like a Sonny Dyke sort of air raid quarterback. I think he has a chance to assert himself, and he hasn't done that. And I think the telltale sign will be, do they go after somebody in the transfer portal, in the summer? And that'll sort of tell you how they feel about that quarterback position. But I'm just at the point where, like, I like Max. I think Max Duggan is, paid his dues. He deserves a chance. I just want to pick somebody. I want them to have somebody in place by the time fall camp rolls around, because I think it would be really advantageous for this team to say, okay, this is our guy. We're going to build around him. We're going to form an offense around him. But they've been splitting the reps pretty evenly in spring practice. Of course, publicly, they're keeping it real close to the vest. And it does feel like, kind of a neck and neck race right now, which it's disappointing to me just because I was hoping somebody would sort of emerge and take over that job.
Well, how much that do you think is they're trying to keep one of those guys out of the portal? I mean, I think I think there's a certain amount of that, but I mean, maybe it is a close race. Here's my take on it. I think, and we're going to get into this really in the weeds tomorrow and talk Big 12 quarterbacks in our weekly roundtable. But I'm with you on the Max Duggins paid his dues things. It just feels like for the offense that Sonny Dykes wants to run, Chandler Morris is a better fit. Am I wrong
Yeah.
on this?
No, I think you're totally right. I mean, Max, his biggest strength so far has been what he's done with his legs. Now,
Yeah.
I think he's been handicapped a little bit by the creativity on offense, but at the same time, there's just been a lot of throws that he's left on the table. And Morris, like we've seen very limited action of him. There are TCU fans that hit me up and they're like, "This guy's amazing." I say, "Okay, well, we saw 4 quarters against Baylor, which was really impressive." And then we saw him get, run over by Oklahoma State, and that was it.
Yeah.
Like that was the
Which
season.
to be fair to him, was
Oh yeah,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not blaming that loss on
But
him.
no, it's fair. It's on tape. Yeah.
It's just those were the 2 games we saw.
Right.
So it's obviously a small sample, but yeah, I think Morris is the better fit. And one thing that sticks in my mind, we sort of try to parse what these coaches say because they don't say a whole lot. But Sonny Dykes did say at one point in the spring, he said, a lot of times the players know before the coaching staff does. It's just on kind of who they rally behind, who they're following. And I just wonder, I wonder if since Max is such a tough dude and he's kind of been around for a while, if he's winning that part of the battle right now, if he's just the type of guy that gets his teammates fired up, which is maybe keeping him around. But yeah, I think the portal aspect is a good point because for sure, like if Max loses the job, there's no reason for him to stick around. If Chandler can't get the job, then he's already moved once. Like maybe he sticks out for a bit, but yeah, they don't have a ton of depth. Like behind those guys is Sam Jackson, who's a fun prospect, but he's a true sophomore. So we'll see how it goes. But I would imagine Morris is going to be the guy. But I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been more obvious so far, at least from what we've heard from spring camp.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's some quarterback battles. I think we're going to see some guys go in the portal from the conference. TCU's got one going on. West Virginia ostensibly is having one, but I think we know the new guy is now. They've brought in JT Daniels. So I bet one of those guys probably hits a portal. Maybe is it Garrett Green? Does Mark y'all think, hey, I'm out of here early? Do we see Baylor, right? I mean, they got, I think Baylor's got opportunity to have maybe 2 guys hit the road, right?
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about Kyron Drones, and then also that's right, Kyron Drones, yeah, and then
Yep.
Chapin. So
yeah. Drones is a talented guy, and I really thought like when people started saying, "Oh yeah, it's a battle between Chapin and Bohannon," I thought that was dumb, and I still think it's gonna be Bohannon. But just
I did too. I'm not sure it should be.
What I'm hearing around the program, though, like Chapin's got a shot. I think they.
He's a better player. Like he's a more.
Yeah.
Look, they protected Gary so well last year. I know people liked him. They won a lot of games at quarterback, but like you and I watched that Texas game. He was not good at certain times in that game, and then that game against Ole Miss. I mean, what are we talking about? Like he was awful. He was horrible.
Yeah, he kept Ole Miss in the game for sure. And if Corral was healthy, then we'd have to see if that Baylor defense could hold up, for 4 quarters in that scenario. But yeah, it is. It's fascinating, man. Like I don't know who the best QB in the league is. It really feels like, the guys that you want to name that have some question marks. Then you have battles going on everywhere across the rest of the league.
We're getting this tomorrow, man. I'm telling you. So I was talking to somebody the other day. We said, hey, is Dylan Gabriel best quarterback in the league? He said no. Eli Letterman covers both. Now covers OU for Tulsa World. Covered Oklahoma State before, and he said, I still think it's Spencer Sanders. Which, so like, I mean, who the hell knows?
Yeah, who knows?
All right, Steven, get you out of here. Let everybody know where they can find you and your work and all of its variety.
Well, as you see on this great graphic here, I'm at Simcox Steven on Twitter. The show is at Locked On TCU, and podcast anywhere you get your podcast. And now on YouTube. Been on YouTube for a couple
Yes.
weeks, so please subscribe to the Locked On Horned Frogs YouTube channel. Would appreciate that if you don't mind throwing a sub my way.
You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _ on Twitter. Find the show where we get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Steven, always a pleasure. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thanks, Josh.